It was a busy afternoon in the small, local grocery store that had stood in the heart of the neighborhood for decades. The shelves were lined with fresh produce, canned goods, and a variety of other essentials. The store was run by an elderly man, Mr. Thomas, who had owned it for as long as anyone could remember. His silver hair and wrinkled hands were a familiar sight as he spent his days stocking shelves, chatting with customers, and offering advice to those who sought it. He was a beloved figure in the community, though many of the younger generation barely took notice of him as they rushed in and out. One such teenager, Alex, was in a hurry. He was running late for a meeting with his friends and had forgotten to grab some snacks for the night. As he entered the store, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He was distracted, tapping away at the screen as he walked down the aisles. Without looking, he bumped into a cart that was sitting idly near the snacks aisle. "Hey, watch where you're going," Alex snapped, glaring at the person behind the cart. The elderly man behind it, Mr. Thomas, looked up with a warm, kind smile. "Sorry about that, son. I must have left it in your way." But Alex, already irritated by the interruption to his plans, didn't feel like being polite. "You should be more careful, old man. It's not like people have time to be waiting for your carts to block the aisles." He rolled his eyes, waiting for the elderly man to move aside. Mr. Thomas simply nodded, his smile never faltering. "I'll move it right away. Thank you for your patience." But Alex wasn't done. He muttered under his breath, "Ugh, typical. Always acting so nice. No wonder people walk all over this place." He grabbed his snacks and headed to the counter, unaware that Mr. Thomas was still standing nearby, watching him with a calm, knowing expression. As Alex waited in line at the counter, he felt the weight of his impatience pressing on him. He tapped his foot on the floor and glanced at his watch. The minutes seemed to drag by as the line moved slowly. He kept eyeing the old man, who was still quietly organizing the shelves near the checkout. Finally, it was Alex's turn to pay. He walked up to the counter, slapped his items onto the register, and pulled out his wallet, still checking his phone for new messages. The cashier, a young woman named Lisa, scanned the items and gave him the total. "That'll be $12.50, she said with a smile, her tone light and friendly. Alex barely looked up as he fumbled with the cash. He tossed a few bills onto the counter, his mind still elsewhere. Yeah, here," he muttered, clearly irritated by the delay. At that moment, Mr. Thomas approached, holding a small box of candy that he had picked up earlier from the shelf. "Excuse me, Lisa," he said gently. "I just wanted to add this to my order. It's for the community food bank, a little something extra for those in need." Lisa smiled warmly at the elderly man and nodded, taking the box from him. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. You're always so generous." Alex barely registered the exchange, but something about the way Lisa spoke caught his attention. He looked up just in time to see Mr. Thomas make his way back to the aisle, and a thought crossed his mind. "Wait a minute," Alex said, squinting at the older man, suddenly realizing who he was. "You're the guy who owns this dump of a store, aren't you?" Mr. Thomas turned, his eyes filled with calm. "Yes, son. This is my shop. Have been running it for many years now." Alex scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Well, no wonder everything's so messed up. It's not surprising that a place like this is stuck in the past, with you running it." He shrugged and turned back to the counter, not caring for Mr. Thomas's response. Unbeknownst to Alex, the elderly man simply smiled and walked away, his step slow but purposeful. Little did he know, a surprise was waiting just around the corner, one that would make him rethink everything he thought he knew about the store and the person behind it. The next day, Alex was walking down the street with his friends, still buzzing from the plans they had made for the night. He passed by Mr. Thomas's store and noticed a large, closed for renovations, sign hanging in the window. A few workers were unloading supplies from a truck outside, But Alex didn't give it much thought. He figured it was just another attempt to spruce up the place. He hadn't thought about Mr. Thomas since their encounter the day before. Later that afternoon, as Alex was scrolling through his social media, he stumbled upon an article that caught his eye. The headline read, "Local business owner donates millions to community renovations and education fund." Intrigued, Alex clicked on the link, and his jaw dropped when he saw the picture. The article featured Mr. Thomas, the elderly man he had insulted the day before, standing with local officials at a community event. The caption read, "Thomas wins Community Leadership Award for his decades of service and unmatched philanthropy." Alex couldn't believe his eyes. This was the same man he had treated with such disrespect. The story went on to highlight how Mr. Thomas had not only been the owner of the store for decades, but had also funded scholarships for underprivileged students, renovated the local park, and helped countless families in need with food and financial assistance. Feeling a mix of shame and disbelief, Alex put his phone down and stared out the window. He had assumed that Mr. Thomas was just another old man stuck in the past, someone who ran a small, outdated shop. He had no idea that he was actually one of the most respected figures in the community, someone who had quietly given back far more than Alex could ever imagine. The next day, Alex felt a deep sense of guilt. He knew he had to make things right. He walked into the store, where a new sign was displayed reading under new management, "Revitalized for a better tomorrow." As he entered, he spotted Mr. Thomas working behind the counter, now looking even more youthful with the revitalized shop and fresh coat of paint. Taking a deep breath, Alex approached the elderly man, who looked up and smiled. "Mr. Thomas, I owe you an apology," Alex said, his voice filled with regret. "I was rude to you yesterday, and I didn't know who you were. I was completely wrong about you, and I'm really sorry for how I acted." Mr. Thomas nodded kindly, his smile never fading. "It's okay, son. I've lived long enough to know that people don't always see things as they are. It's good of you to apologize, but I hope you remember this lesson. Always treat others with respect, no matter who they are." Alex nodded, his heart heavy but relieved. He had learned something important that day, and it would stay with him forever. As he left the store, Alex couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of admiration for Mr. Thomas. The old man had turned out to be much more than he had ever imagined, and Alex now realized that true worth wasn't measured by appearances or assumptions. It was found in actions, generosity, and kindness.